This is the Meet the Candidates Forum. We have people up for several different positions in the town, and they're going to be on the ballot for May 16th at the town elections. We're here, you can ask questions of any of them through the moderator. There are cards here to fill out. Put one question on each card, who you want it to go to or to any group, and the moderator will read them as she goes along. We'll start the evening with just everybody introducing themselves and just give a brief reason why you're running for that position, and we'll carry on from there. I thank you all for being here, all for participating, all for the work that you're about to, undergo when you go through the election and take those seats. So on we go. Why don't we start at the very end with Devin?
Great. Just to clarify, you want this full reason of being here, like the minute or two talking about what we're doing, or just
a minute?
I'm Devin, and I'm here to talk to all of you. It's nice to meet you.
Just a minute about why you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming. My name is Devin O'Rourke. It's great to be here. This is about my 10th year of being in Eastham, and the reason I'm here really isn't because of me, it's because of my daughter, Finny. She's actually to your left, about 300 feet. She's playing softball right now. My wife Jackie's coaching the t-ball team. Finny's in 2nd grade, and we've been part of Eastham full-time since she was in preschool. I think that journey with her has been sort of what's enabled me to sort of get a sense of what goes on in that part of our community. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have any idea what goes on too much in the school. Though that said, when we came here about a decade ago, we built our house just behind the school, the elementary school. So I live on Knoll Street, right at the end of Minister's Pond. So one thing I should say is I do hear the kids every day. And actually, that's about the only time that's sort of the sad time is the summer when you can't hear their sort of joyous screams. And so there's been this incentive kind of baked into my life since I've been here, trying to be part of that joy. I've had a chance, growing up as an adult, to be an educator. I started out after college working in private schools. I was a high school science teacher for about 6 years. That was at Berkshire School out in Sheffield, Mass, if you've ever been all the way out. I spent a year at Boston University getting a master's in education as well. My wife's a teacher. She's been a teacher for decades. She's an educational consultant now. So we're deep in the weeds in education. But trying to give back now. I'm in biotech and working for a small startup. I kind of miss the classroom, and I miss the teachers. I miss the sort of day-to-day interactions of the kids and the teachers and the community. And I think this is a nice opportunity to be able to give back that way. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them, but also happy to be here, and thanks for the chance.
Okay. I had to write notes, sorry. Good evening, and thanks for this opportunity. My name's Deborah Raymond. I've been an Eastham resident since 1994, raised my family here. I've worked as an elementary school teacher on the Outer Cape for the past 3 decades. In addition to working as a teacher, my roles as a parent, Eastham taxpayer, school council member, family group volunteer, and local teachers union president, all those roles have really allowed me to gain a deep understanding of the distinct and vital responsibilities of everyone involved in the welfare of schools. I'm dedicated to the field of education, and I think I bring experience, knowledge, training that's really necessary to support Eastham Elementary School. I think it's really important to collaborate with fellow board members, educators, families, and would look forward to developing policies that prioritize student achievement, support teachers, and most importantly, increase attention to our children's social and emotional health. And also, I'd be a fierce advocate for diverse, compassionate, and inclusive school community. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Monica?
Hi, my name is Monica Montoya Quintero. I've been in the States for 27 years, and I moved to Eastham 10 years ago because of my baby, I decided to stay home, so we moved closer to my husband's job. And my interest of being part of the committee is because I have 2 children, to having them in school, and I want to know and be part of the decisions and also be able to have a voice.
Art?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Art Otorino. This would be my second 3-year term on the Select Board. Prior to the Select Board, I was the chairman and vice chairman of the Planning Board, chairman and vice chairman of the Strategic Planning Committee when we created the original strategic plan, vice chairman of the Finance Committee, and chairman and vice chairman of the Electronic Voting Committee. The other things I do are I'm on the executive board of the Historical Society as the treasurer, and I'm on the board of the Nauset Light Preservation Society. So obviously, I enjoy doing things in the local community, and that's pretty much why I'm running. I think in the past 3 years, the Select Board has made some significant accomplishments. We have, in fact, implemented the Family Support Plan, where we've got we're supporting pre-kindergarten. We've created the Taxpayer Assistance Program so we can help elderly citizens with their taxes. We've developed a housing plan for five-year housing plan. We have developed a very good relationship with the Housing Trust. The financial state of Eastham is probably better than it's ever been. We began the initiation of Tea Time and La Piata Plaza, and for the first time ever, we have a draft plan of what we need to do with Route 6, and that's my major bugaboo, Route 6. I think there's 3 reasons why I think you should vote for me. Number 1 is I'm dedicated to Eastham. If you ask anybody to tell you I'm a hardworking person, I'll do whatever I need to do. I have significant local government experience. I have been in local government in Alameda, California, Jackson, Tennessee, DeKalb, Illinois, Lenox, Massachusetts, and Schenectady, New York, in various positions. And the accomplishments that I mentioned above, I think, are proof that we can continue the progress we've made and do even more. Thank you.
Amy?
That's a tough act to follow. Amy Ekman. I've lived in town, a little over 20 years. And first got started on the recycling committee. That was kind of my passion at the time. And I quickly sort of moved to other things. I was on the search committee. I was on the cable advisory committee, negotiating, I think, our first 10-year contract we had, which was kind of a big deal at the time. I worked with filming meetings in this room before I ran for the board, and I kind of joked with people that I was out in the audience for so many years that I wanted a comfy chair up front and decided to run. But there were some pretty hot issues in town at the time. People remember the Ocean Beach issue. I was pretty embroiled in that. And I really enjoy it. I really like talking to people, meeting new people. A lot of people ask me questions about different things in town, and I love, if I don't know, I can find out for them and help people learn about, how to make their time in Eastham the best it can be. I've been on the select board, this is the end of my 12th year. So I did 2 terms, then I went off, and I was on the library building committee for 3 years, and on the finance committee, and the electronic voting committee, and then the library was done, so I came back, and finishing up my second 6-year stint. I'm also a member of the Affordable Housing Trust, and I think that's something we really need to focus on. Everywhere in the Cape needs to be focused on that, but we have some particular challenges here in Eastham with not much developable land left, and but I think we're acquiring new properties and finding new ways to do things. So I look forward to work we still have to do. So.
Amy is our go-to person on the select board. Any question, any problem or issue, Amy knows about it, and she can help you through it. Unbelievable resource.
Scott?
Good evening, everybody. It's tough to follow 2 of my favorite people, so But I'm very excited to be running for re-election for moderator. My name is Scott Carey, and I'm a local business owner, and over the last 30 years, been on a variety of town committees, including Finance Committee, Strategic Plan with Art. I'm on 4 or 5 nonprofit boards and pretty vocal in the community to try to ensure a great Eastham for now and into the future. What I like about the moderator's position is I think it gives me an opportunity to work with everybody in town, anybody who might have a position or an issue. When you get to town meeting, you have people coming in to come in on positions from either a micro or a macro area, depending on what their issue of the day is. And I think I have an ability to kind of understand the issues that are on the warrant. And I don't, currently as a business owner, I don't have the time to put into the town to be on the select board that these two do. We're thankful to have them and the other 3 members that are on the board. But I do think I have an ability to be empathetic to the person that's in the audience that has issues and wants to be heard. So I'm looking forward to another 3-year term, should you be kind enough to re-elect me. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Linda?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Linda Sassi, and I'm running for town clerk. Many of you have seen me working in the town clerk's office for the past 5 years, but for the ones who have not, I would like to share with you why I came to Eastham and why I know I'll make an excellent town clerk. My background is in customer service and sales, as well as municipal government. I worked for 13 years as a customer service manager at Spalding Sports and 17 years for the sales and service manager for Yankee Candle, prior to becoming the administrative assistant for the town administrator in Hatfield. I would probably still be working for corporate America now. However, in 2016, Yankee Candle was bought out by Rubbermaid, and 10% of the workforce was laid off 2 weeks before Christmas, including me. This is what led me to municipal government. I find the work interesting and ever-changing, and in its own way, it's not very different than customer service. The general public are your customers, and they deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Once our 2 beautiful daughters, Angie and Hannah, had graduated from college and had gone on to their own careers, we thought about downsizing and moving to a place where we would eventually retire. My husband Ron and I wanted to move to Eastham. We had been renting cottages, maybe yours, for the past 25 years, so it was a natural choice. In 2017, I applied for a position in the town clerk's office and started in January of 2018. We had just found a home in Eastham in October, so I lived here for 6 months by myself, while my husband would bring our house down to me every weekend in pieces in a minivan. So the minivan actually ended up conking out at the end. Meanwhile, I was given more responsibilities in the clerk's office, helping to set up over 20 elections, licensing, voter registration, and parking tickets. I noticed that we had 3 sets of vital records and very little space, so I suggested that we scan these. Sue Fisher thought it was a good idea, so she told me to scan over 60 years' worth of vital records, births, deaths, and marriages. She also had me read through the Board of Selectmen's minutes going back to the 1930s, so I would get a better sense of what Eastham was all about. If anyone knows Sue, you know that she would do this. When Sue retired in 2019, Cindy Nicholson was made acting town clerk, so that gave me the opportunity to be acting assistant town clerk. This was a steep learning curve, but Cindy was instrumental in my success. I enrolled in clerk school and received my certified municipal clerk certification in 3 years. My promise to you, the citizens of Eastham, is that I will never forget my customer service skills and treat everyone with kindness and respect. That's the way I was brought up. My mom, Jean, passed away a couple of months ago. at the age of 90. My only wish is that she could be here to see me sworn in as town clerk. I know she would be proud.
Thank you. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Shaw. I'd like to thank the Eastham Chamber of Commerce and the Eastham Dog Owners Association for tonight. But I should say, most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your wonderful support of the Eastham Public Library over the past years. I first became involved in the Eastham Public Library shortly after my husband and I moved here full-time in 1999. And I volunteered to assist at one of the large book sales that they used to have at the Methodist Church for a long weekend. And as a result of that, was subsequently asked to join the Friends, excuse me. And I proceeded to be their treasurer for about 8 years. Following that, I decided to run for a position on the Board of Trustees, and I was elected in 2017. And at different times over the past years, I've served as the vice chair and the chair. I served on the building committee for the new library in town, and I served as campaign co-chair of the Eastham Library Building Fund, which was successful in raising over $1 million for our new library. I've also served a 3-year term on the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, their state advisory council, and I was asked to apply by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners for a position on their last construction grant review program. Both positions gave me an opportunity to promote Eastham at the state level and to learn more about the libraries in the Commonwealth. I also serve as chair of the Finance Committee in town, and I serve as chair of the Community Preservation Committee in town. I'd like to continue to represent you as a member of the Board of Trustees. Thank you for your past support and for your support going forward.
Thank you, Mary. Al?
Thank you. My name is Ignatius Alfano. I'm better known in town as Al. My mother had high hopes for me by giving me that name. I too would like to thank the Chamber and the Dog Owners Association for giving us an opportunity to be here tonight, and I thank you for coming to listen to what we have to say to become better acquainted with us. I asked the question, why do I want to be a library trustee? And the answer I keep coming up with is I want to make a difference in town. We're a small town community, and I really think it's in small towns where you could really get involved and make a difference. In considering whether to run for my third 3-year term as a library trustee, I asked myself, have I made a difference? Have I been making a difference? And the answer that I came up with was yes. I've been actively involved on the Library Board of Trustees, but I didn't start there. I retired to Cape Cod in 2001 with my wife, Carmela, and left a teaching career behind that spanned about 30 years in Bedford, New York. When I first started looking for things to do on the Cape, my education background came through, and I did things like volunteer at the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History in the Marine Room, where I knew a little bit about mixing chemicals and got a very warm reception as a result of that. But then I also got involved with working in the VITAL program at the Brooks Library, which is a program for people with sight loss. And again, using my teaching background, working with people to learn how to use computers and technology to help them along with their sight loss. I also worked as I was on the board of Sight Loss Services. So those were the kinds of things that I did initially. In town, I became very involved with a number of organizations and was an officer at some level in a number of cases, the president of the organization after a while. That included the Lions Club Windmill Weekend, in which I was secretary or co-secretary. the Eastham Flower Islands, I've been involved with that, and at our church with the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which I'm the president of, and the Knights of Columbus, which I am now the deputy Grand Knight and will be Grand Knight next year, which is the fancy name that Knights call their president. So I've had some leadership experience. When I retired to the Cape, I very quickly became involved with the Friends of the Eastham Library and served as a secretary, a membership chair, and eventually the president. And then I've been involved with the Eastham Library Building Fund. I chaired the building fund that Mary mentioned a few moments ago. And as she said, we were successful in raising $1 million for the library. But I think more importantly than the $1 million is we were initially a public relations committee, and we laid the groundwork for town meeting and went into town meeting really not knowing what was going to happen. And we came out with an overwhelming majority of people supporting the library. And many of them said it was based on the work that our committee had done, which obviously made us feel very good. During that time, I regularly attended library board meetings and became familiar with the trustees and the workings of the library. And since I've been a trustee, I've been secretary, vice chair, and chair. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Board of Library Trustees and with the town. I believe that the residents and voters of Eastham deserve to have the best library that they can possibly have, and I want to do my best to help that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Thanks to all of you for that intro. We'll now proceed. This forum, Meet the Candidates, is being presented by the Eastham Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with the Eastham Dog Owners Association. We get together each year to put this together, and for the benefit of our community, I hope you enjoy it. We're fortunate tonight to have Teresa Martin. She's the executive director of the Lower Cape TV, and she's our moderator for this evening. So go easy on her. She's got experience too, Scott. But all questions will go through Teresa, and the timing's going to be done by Bev Hobbs, who, if you're on any committee, you've probably met Bev because she's probably on it too. She serves on a lot of different committees around town, and appreciate a very hard worker. And her next big thing that I know about is the parade, so we'll be working on that. And that's in September, but just a little plug for Bev, because we love that parade.
Thank you, Jim.
And,
Hey, Jim, thank
Madam
you.
Moderator?
So before we begin, I just want to turn to everyone in the audience here. Do you have any other questions that you want to write on cards and pass them up? Pass them on up. Encouraging people to pass them up. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the questions and I'm putting them in kind of logical order, so we're not hopping all over from person to topic to topic. It'll make it easier for everyone to be able to follow the flow. And while I'm doing that, I want to thank the organizers, I want to thank the candidates, I want to thank everybody in this room and everybody out there virtually following along, because what makes our communities work is knowing the people who are involved in making the pieces work together. And evenings like this provide an invaluable way to connect faces and names and voices and make us feel like we really do know each other as we work together. So a big thank you to everyone who's bringing this together. We're going to go in order kind of visually from group to group, so that we'll kind of focus questions on one office and then questions on another office. And we're going to start with the school committee, because you're here. This is the one role. There's 2 seats and 3 people running for the seats, and we have a number of different questions. So the first question from the audience is, they want to hear from each of you. What do you hope to accomplish during your term on the committee? So we'll go 3 minutes. Oh, yeah, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes, because we don't really have all night to be here. And Bev is going to be timing, and I think her phone will bark when 3 minutes are up, because this is the dog, what's more appropriate.
Change it to bark.
This is, after all, thank you, the Dog Owners Association. So Devin, could you start with 3 minutes, and then we'll go in order.
I don't think my answer should take 3 minutes, but I am excited to hear the alarm.
I don't have a bark.
So I think in terms of, there's kind of two pieces. One is in terms of strategy, strategic planning. Sure. So I think there's kind of two pieces to the answer. One piece speaks to the strategic planning. I think over the course of 3 years, that feels like a long time, but, and I'm sure like getting everybody that's sat in committees here, that goes by really quickly, or too quick. And I think one of the things I've seen change somewhat quickly here in my time in Eastham is I haven't seen as many kids keep coming to school. And one thing I'd like to make sure is a focus, if I'm lucky enough to be part of the committee, is to have good estimates on what we think is happening, not just within the town, but around the communities, Cape Cod wide and outside, even potentially statewide, getting a handle on being predictive and having as accurate as possible predictions for what we think is going to be coming in and what we think is going to be exiting the elementary school system. Think about what happened in Brewster probably more than 10 years ago now, and having a population of a certain size and having 2 schools, and now having a population of a different size and still having 2 schools, and they're making best with what they have. But I'd love to make sure that for the resources we've allocated, we always have a strong sense of, are we allocating those resources to serve the size of the community that's there? And that's not an easy thing to do, that kind of demography, but that's one thing that I think is on my mind. Another thing related to that in terms of the kind of composition of the community that we have is, I know there's going to be a fair number of teachers at the next 3, 4, 5 years potentially retiring from the elementary school, and just trying to come up with ways for how do we attract new candidates. I know it's really hard to be a 20-something coming out of your either bachelor's or potentially master's degree in education and trying to start your life here. But I do know what that's like, because I've been fortunate enough to effectively start my adult life here about 5 years after my work in education. So trying to have a good sense of what we are seeing both in the student body as well as the teaching group. And then the second piece to that is just collaborating. I think the other thing with committees is that you don't just make these decisions in isolation. And so trying to learn in those 3 years what other committees are doing, and in terms of their strategic planning, say just in housing, how might housing in its own group inform the kinds of decisions we could help with, say, well, these teachers could be coming into these areas, or families of these sizes can be supported. So I think there's just a lot of kind of cross collaboration I'd like to be a part of as well. And I think 3 years will certainly be enough time to get started with it.
Thanks. Deb?
When I think of priorities that I would have as a school committee member, I think that for me, it very much is looking at what education looks like post-pandemic, and really thinking about loss of learning, the loss of community many students have felt, working on policies that are going to promote a sense of belonging, and also really focusing on supporting the school's vision and mission statement. I also think that a big part, I agree with the housing issue that we have. I think it would be important as a school committee body to be working with other departments to see what families really need in order to live and thrive here in Eastham. I know when I was raising my children, one of the big issues, my kids didn't actually go to Eastham Elementary School. Truro, where I work, had school choice, and because I needed some before school childcare and after school childcare, you know, my kids weren't able to experience Eastham Elementary School. So just being really mindful about what the whole family system needs and how a school committee can support that.
Thank you. Monica?
My interest and what it got me here is the school lunch. Because of the pandemic, I got a way to see and taste what the kids are eating. And I feel it should be different. And I'm hoping that I will be able to get something better for them through this. Healthier and warmer too, because my older son, he's 9, he tells me that the lunch is not warm, it's supposed to be a hot lunch, and all these little things that it may seem silly, but it's very important. Not all of the kids have a chance to have a lunch from school, from home. And if what they eating is at school, it should be definitely very healthy and warm enough to eat.
Great. Got a few more questions for the group. So the next two questions that we have are fairly specific questions. The first one is, what's your view on the masking of children?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What's your view on the masking of children?
I take it you're talking about in the context of COVID in the classroom?
I'm not sure. This is actually what the question was from the audience, so I'll leave it as it is asked.
Do you want us to go in the same order?
Yep, same order.
Okay.
We're going to be consistent.
Yeah, so despite the fact that I have a doctorate in molecular biology, I still don't feel comfortable giving the consensus answer on a public health policy because I don't have a doctorate in public health policy. And I think that my time in education and in science, if it's taught me anything, is that the recent pandemic, one of the things that's been really frustrating as a scientist and as an educator is that they've taken very complicated issues and tried to boil them down into simple sound bites. Not that this is the case in just this forum, but I can tell you the things that I do know about masking children are the case that it is contextual, like a lot of things in education and otherwise. Things in terms of putting a child in a mask, it can have to do with airflow, it can have to do with occupancy, it can have to do with whether or not you have infrastructure for hospitals to support all the other people who are not the children who can also become contacted. It is complicated. But then in the end, there is a policy that gets established. And if it was to say what would be my position to support it or be against it, I would still leave the masking policy to be the standard that the public health officials have promoted at the time. They are the experts, and I would put my faith in them.
Deb?
I absolutely agree that we really need to look at the experts, the people in public health, look at what the Department of Ed is saying. And I know for kids, I know kids still, there are some kids who feel comfortable wearing masks. Some kids feel uncomfortable not wearing masks in my school. And because masking isn't mandated anymore, I think it should be kind of the child's comfort level or their family's comfort level, and not to kind of question those choices. It's just like we wouldn't question why you're wearing purple socks today. You choose to wear the mask or you choose not to at this point. And if there was ever a mandate, I think that would come from health officials in the Department of Ed. And as a school committee member, I would support that.
Thanks. Monica?
Well, I will support also a group of people who are prepared and able to have an educated decision. And personally, I feel like even now that we don't have to wear it anymore, I feel it helps. Even a regular cold, we notice that it makes a difference. And my kids, I'm talking only about our decision. We are conscious that when we're not feeling too well, we wear a mask because we want to protect others. And I just feel it's each individual decision, especially now that we're finally moving away from all of that.
Thanks. Okay, the next question is also kind of specific. The questioner states that our schools are failing to teach civics and history, and this person wants to know, how will you advocate for these subjects?
So I think in terms of advocacy, one of the first places, again, you could look at just in terms of the curriculum, and there are going to be established guidelines by the state and federal level. Certainly at the state level, there's guidance for civics education. If the notion is that you're failing to educate the audience, the children, in terms of that education, there are existing standards. So then one of the first places I would imagine looking is to just ensure that in the schools, those standards are being met. That would take you in one direction. But I would also just advocate that civics shouldn't end and only extend to the walls of the classroom. That's, again, one of the kind of comments at the introductions of, we're in a small town. We should use that to our advantage. If you want to teach kids about civics, bring them to the meeting we just had last weekend. You did a good job, everybody. But we have these core opportunities to have kids be part of the democratic process. Even something just as simple as bringing them to Windmill Weekend can mean a lot. And I think kids look at school and they look at field trips as maybe an opportunity to learn. But if we have, again, that's why I to say this isn't just about a committee in one box within the school committee. If you can collaborate across committees as well, you can have opportunities in which families can bring their children to be part of our community, and you'll really drive home that civics education. Education shouldn't just, as I say, end in the classroom.
Deb?
Well, I think I would start by saying that I would always have to be very mindful about my role as a school committee member. I know that curriculum is kind of in the lane of administration and teaching staff. So if we were looking at the kids' competency in civics and social studies, it would be a discussion to be had with administration, maybe looking at some data in terms of test scores. I don't think there's this social studies MCAS in 5th grade anymore, but maybe looking at some other metrics to see where kids are in their learning of civics and history. But I think it's really important as a school committee member to realize, curriculum decisions are not in my lane. It's more, so we are there to be questioning administration, to be setting policy. So I would just be having those discussions in meetings with administrators.
Thanks. Monica?
Well, this is actually important to me, and this is one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm setting an example for my kids, and we do participate in everything. I was with them at the town meeting on Saturday because I want them to be part of everything, to learn from little. And especially me that I was not born here, and all of this is really new. Because I moved here when I was 17, so I had not a chance to vote in Colombia, where I'm from. And everything that the town does, we always participate in, because I want them to be proud and feel like they belong here. And not only them, my children, but I feel it's important for every kid to be so proud, because the prouder you are, the more you take care of it.
Thank you. Okay, and there's one last kind of double question here for the elementary school committee. And it's a kind of an operational question. And the first part of it is, are you for or against increasing the school budget? And I think this may be a related question. Are you for or against decreasing class size in school?
So I think in terms of budget decisions, again, it's difficult to make in a vacuum without context. So to say, are you going to just, yes, spend more for the sake of spending more? No. If there's a need for raising the operational expenses and it's justified, then yes. The foundational piece is you're here to help the kids and the teachers to have a great educational community. If it costs more, then I'm all for it. The second piece, do you want to go down the line just for the first thing?
Do both pieces, please.
Second piece in terms of decreasing class size, my daughter's in a class of 10 right now. I can't imagine going lower than that. However, the class underneath her has 2 first-grade classes of about 20 on average. And even at that, I look at that and say, that's wonderful. But it kind of goes back to my initial point in policy of trying to figure out what's coming. I actually worry about class sizes getting too small. But I'd like to have the data to back that up before actually, advocating for a change.
Deb?
Well, I know with school budgets, there are certain fixed expenditures that you just can't get around. Teacher salaries, they're always going to go up. Special ed, out-of-district placements, there are certain laws and regulations, there are certain things that the budget could go up despite your best attempts to be fiscally responsible. I think there's a really strong need to balance being fiscally responsible and making sure you're giving children the absolute best education that we can provide. And so I think that's part of the committee work, to take a budget that's presented by administration and carefully look at it, weigh the pros and cons. And I don't think it can be a blanket, yes, I agree with raising the budget, or no, I don't. I think you have to look at it really carefully, see what the priorities of the school are, and balance it with being respectful of the taxpayers as well. In terms of class size, I think you really need to look at how old the children are in the classroom. I think there's really good research showing what optimum class sizes are. The younger the kids, the smaller the class sizes should be. But I think, there's also a point of having classes that are too small as well. And I feel like because of, the housing situation on the Cape, that we probably won't be looking at, for a while anyway, growing class sizes. I think it's going to be more of like how can we help families of young children stay in Eastham and be part of the school system.
Thanks. Monica?
Well, I agree completely. It's hard to decide in something that we don't know exactly yet, in the necessities that are going to be there. And if this school needs it, and of course, it has to be well studied to be able to increase our budget. And the school sizes, I feel they're actually perfect right now, especially what my background is. When I went to school, I was one of 40 kids, or sometimes even more, for only one teacher. So I already feel that my kids are in heaven, because they almost feel like they have a one-to-one. I cannot complain about that.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all three of you, for answering these questions.
Thank you.
And good luck. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Select Board. There are 2 candidates for 2 seats, so we're basically going to get to ask questions of our continuing selectmen, which is actually kind of a nice opportunity, right? There are a few questions that all revolve around kind of use of places. 2 of them touch on Wiley Park. So dogs at Wiley Park is a hot topic. There's no land management plan. Should you have an active voice? And kind of related to that is, what do you think is necessary to ensure that Eastham voters will have a say in the future of Wiley Park? So a couple of Wiley Park questions.
You want to start? Oh, you can go first.
Nobody wants to touch that, huh?
No. I asked him if I could go first. So I've been a lifelong dog owner. The only time I haven't had a dog in my life is when college and the military. So not two good places to have dogs. Wiley Park. So Wiley Park was initially purchased to basically protect that fragile area near the pond. It was purchased for conservation and recreation. There's a beach there, as everybody knows. There's a playground. And it's only been, increasing, I think, dog use over the last, 10 years maybe. It's really picked up, I think. I know there's always a certain contingent that meets there. My neighbor, Cindy, I know, see her at, 4:05 after she get home from work, and there she's going with her dog to meet up at Wiley Park. And, I think we have leash law, current laws in town, bylaws for dogs. Dogs are supposed to be on leash. unless they're under immediate and effective voice control. So I think, in all places, people push that a little bit sometimes, and not necessarily the residents of Eastham. People come from other places, obviously, and use that area. So it's heavily used. The only say we really would have in something like that, as far as managing Wiley Park, is changing bylaws. And then that would be voted at town meeting. So we don't really have jurisdiction to enforce things. It's actually under the purview of the Conservation Commission. And I believe, and under consultation with the Open Space Committee, I think the CONSCOM sort of works hand in hand with them. So it's more, the ball's in their court, let's say. But I don't think anyone on either of those committees wants to do away with dogs in Wiley Park. They know it's a loved and valued resource in town. I think some people are, afraid of overuse and damage, and that's hard to regulate for anybody, unless you put a fence and a gate, and nobody wants to do that. So I think it'll continue as, people enjoying their dogs there responsibly, and I look forward to it. I bring my dog there occasionally even, and it's a nice place, so.
My turn? We've got a major war going on. People that like dogs, people that don't like dogs, people that want to have dogs on leashes, people that want to let their dogs run loose. We have a limited number of recreational resources in town. We need to come up with some solutions that are a compromise so that everyone, dog owners and non-dog owners, feel comfortable using the facilities. And I'm hoping that between the Conservation Commission, Conservation Trust people and the Conservation Commission, that they'll be able to come up with that kind of solution. But I don't think, there's a lot of emotion associated with this right now. And I think we need to let that emotion die down and then try and come up with something that works for everybody.
Thanks. Okay, the next is another place-related question, which is, did the recent master plan presentation meet the Tea Time Committee and town goals?
I'll go with that one. Absolutely. Okay, we developed a strategic plan about 5 years ago, and what we're doing at Tea Time and what we're talking about doing at La Piata Plaza completely meets that strategic plan relative to retail, housing, business, et cetera. So I think the plan that's been developed, okay, does address all those issues. Now, some people aren't crazy about that plan, but I think it's a mix of residential, retail, and we're talking about a community center potentially. And right now, that master plan does meet what we've said we want to do relative to the strategic plan. It will take a while to implement this, and it'll be in pieces. Because where we are right now is we need to go find developers to work with to do certain portions of that. So in the long term, we meet the total vision.
Everything he said. Plus, I think really bringing in the COA in that conversation. We had talked about, all three of those parcels, the Town Center Plaza, COA, and the Tea Time, and really, finding the best use for each one of those properties. And I think that Council on Aging survey they did as part of their strategic plan really showed that people want a new facility for the COA. It's been great where it has been, but I think people are ready for something newer. And the thought of combining it with a community center, I think, is a great idea. As I mentioned before, housing is a huge problem. We can use that COA. It's in a residential neighborhood. Not talking about putting apartments there or anything big, but, smaller, maybe a cottage colony with some duplexes or something like that. Nothing too intense. Leave more of the intensity out near Route 6 where there's access to, public transportation and more services and things like that. But as Art said, I'm very excited about that master plan. The concept designs, nothing's concrete, but I think it was close to 80 housing units, several businesses, community center, new council on aging, plus some recreation areas. It's very exciting for Eastham.
Great, thanks. The last set of questions are kind of sort of almost policy questions that start to touch on housing. So the first one is, what is your opinion on deed restrictions and transfer tax on real estate sales, which ties pretty directly into housing?
So deed restrictions, that's very exciting. We're wanting to do that we need special legislation to be able to purchase deed restrictions from people. And it's a little confusing how it works, but basically the town would pay someone to deed restrict their home as year-round housing. So whether they sell it or whatever they do with it, after they're gone, it will stay year-round housing. How much you pay someone to do that, I have absolutely no idea what a deed restriction would cost. So we would need some outside help to be able to formulate what that would cost the town. But I think that's a huge thing. And what was the other part?
Transfer tax.
Oh, transfer tax. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the transfer tax on, I think Chatham might do it, or maybe on Nantucket.
There's a number of towns that are
Yeah, you might
looking
know.
to implement it,
I'll let him take it.
okay? And it is an option. We're looking at every option that we can look at to try and improve the housing situation. And it's probably that and wastewater are our biggest issues in the next 3 to 5 years. So we're looking at all sorts of options. One of them is, as Amy said, the deed restriction. We've started to look at tiny houses. There's a development where you build a small house, it's got a compost septic system, and it goes on a very small lot. It's very small, but it's easy to put up, and it provides housing. So it's one thing we're going to talk about in the future on the select board. So it is, anything we can do to try and increase the housing. And we've already done that with, our accessory dwelling law. We changed that. Some of those zoning laws that we just put in place are addressing housing. So anything we can come up with to try and increase the housing in town, we're going to do.
Great. And the last question is also related, which is, what is your opinion on applying the resident taxpayer exemption? You look at each other, look at that.
And I'm gonna be very honest with you, I was a non-resident for a number of years. And as a non-resident, it's frustrating that you have no input or impact on what happens with your money. The non-resident tax exemption thing, the resident, to do that, all it does is move money from one pot to another. It doesn't do anything to generate additional funds for housing. And the amount of money it moves is pretty minimal. Now, a number of years ago, the select board agreed among themselves, and that was before I was on, that until the split was what, 55, 45?
60/40.
60/40, 60% part-time residents, 40% residents
For 2 years.
for 2 years, then that would be under discussion. It comes up every year, okay? There's some members of the select board that are for it. There are some members of the select board that are against it. I'll be honest with you, personally, I'm against it. I think it divides the town. I think it pits neighbor against neighbor, and it doesn't increase housing. It does give some relief, but it's a small amount of relief.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is divisive, and it really only makes sense, my opinion is, it only makes sense when you have like 75% or more of non-residents and 25% then or fewer of residents, because otherwise the impact is pretty high on those non-residents, and it's really not that much of a benefit for the people who need it. And that's the other problem with it. Everyone would get the exemption, not just people who need it. And so we really have tried to develop things that help people that need it. Like in the schools, we offer free preschool, free after-school, free lunches. We have free lunches preschool through, or I don't think they get lunch at preschool, kindergarten through 12th grade. Everybody gets a free lunch. And so we're trying to help younger families not have to worry about things like that. We also are trying to put money into housing. And like Art said, the ADU thing, that's been growing consistently since we put that new bylaw into effect. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, and I don't think we'll ever hit that 60-40 here.
No.
I really don't. It's not been trending that way. We had sort of a weird blip during COVID where it actually went the other way, because so many people came here during COVID, and now it's kind of settling back to where it was pre-COVID. But I really don't see it changing too much. I think younger people are excited to move here if they can find a place. We just got to try to make it a little more enticing for them.
The Tax Assistance Committee that we established a couple of years ago is you can apply to that committee and get money for your taxes. Okay, and the purpose of that was, and there's some, income things, et cetera, but the purpose of that was people need financial help. That's direct financial help, okay? And so that's one of the things in all the programs that we've tried to do is say, how can we provide direct financial help? And we're limited by what the state says we can do, but we're pushing that to see whatever we can do to try and provide relief to people.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Now,
you.
we'll move on to moderator, which there is one role and one person. Welcome, moderator.
Thank you very
And
much.
I have just one question for you. Could you describe the role and responsibilities of that moderator position?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. But before I get to that, it's very funny because I'm looking over at the three people that are running for the school committee, and my wife was on the Eastham Elementary School Committee for 6 years and for the chair for the balance of the end of those several years. And many of the programs that are in place now were, kind of came under that group of people, including, the daycare in the morning and the lunch program with Jackie. And so it's interesting to watch, some of the questions that were from the audience and the answers. And because of the timing that she was there, she was there, and I'm looking out at my friend in the audience who's also on the Eastham Elementary School Committee. It was amazing of how many times the questions about the COVID and the masking and the policies come in, and the phone would ring and we'd see it would be the principal, and Maura would just be like, here we go, you know what I mean? Like, what's going to happen now? So it's very interesting to watch, and I think, you'll get the opportunity to work with that young lady out there in the teal, Mrs. Crozier, and I wish you guys the best because I think the school will be well served. But anyway, so back to my question, the role of the moderator. So one of the reasons I like the moderator is, ultimately at some point down the road when I'm not running a business and I don't have a 13-year-old, I'd love to be in their position on the select board. But at the moment, I don't have the time to dedicate to the time that they put in and the other people on the board. But one of the things I like about the moderator is you get the opportunity to know what's going on in town. You get the opportunity to understand, when you hear people talk about the zoning bylaw committee and what those articles were. And when you listen to people on Saturday, we like to say that, people, when they get up at that microphone, you don't know where they're coming from initially, right? It could be, we were joking before, it could be somebody who is speaking about a zoning issue that had a hard time doing what they wanted at their cottage or their house, or it could be somebody who is burned because their neighbor did something that affected their life. So you kind of get that opportunity to look at it as a whole and to be, kind of like put yourself into their position and to get an opportunity to let everybody, kind of have their say. And because nobody's vote is more important than anybody else's, so I hope that was my goal. And I just finished my 4th town meeting, and I hope that And, you know, and there was a person at the meeting that I went up to after, and I said, you know, you didn't think I was tough on you? And she's like, no, you were fine. And I said, you know, I wanted to give you as much time as I could within the bounds of the meeting and, you know, to try to keep you within the lane. So I don't know if I got out of my, I saw Mrs. Hobbs with her finger up and the and I was like, uh-oh, buzzer's going off. There we go.
I didn't want
I
to
actually-
alarm you.
I actually have just a follow-up question I know people do have about the town moderator role, which is this is something that happens once a year only, and then you check out the rest of the year? I've heard people ask that. That's why I'm asking you.
No, I mean, that's kind of why I like it, you know, the
a new
moderator gets an
question? This is a new
opportunity,
question.
the moderator gets opportunity to appoint some people to different committees, and, you know, for instance, Ms. Shaw is one of my appointees to the Finance Committee, and she is coming up for a new 3-year term in July 1st. So we will do an intensive interrogation of her and the work that she's done, and I'll interview her coworkers before we make, no, I'm back. But yeah, so you get an opportunity to do that. You know, you get an appointment on various committees in town, the moderator gets to appoint. I feel like you're part of the government as an elected official, and, you know, so that's why I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Now we'll move on to town clerk. Also, one person, one role, welcome. I have 2 questions for you. One is actually the exact same question I just asked, except, of course, for town clerk. Could you explain the roles and responsibilities in a nutshell of the town clerk? Because not everyone knows what that role does.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that the town clerk does. Some people think all we do is issue dog licenses and parking tickets, and that's just not true. We're basically the keepers of all the records. So we keep the records of every meeting, every board, all the minutes. We keep all of the, you know, I just think back to 2019 when we had a flood in the vault. And the water was literally pouring out the top of the vault, and all of these ancient books were about to get destroyed. So we called in the DPW, and, you know, it was like a fire brigade. We took the books out one by one. We had to send them off to get demolded, and then they came back. We waited a while, and we had to send them back out again because they were moldy again. So these are some of the things that people don't even think about what we do. But I would say the biggest, most important thing that we do is elections. Since I've been here, I had to do a public records request, which is yet another thing we do. I've done 22 elections, including 2 dual elections. And some of my great election workers are here in the audience. Thank you very much. But ever since the Votes Act of 2020, July of 2020, because of COVID, everyone can vote by mail, every election. So that makes it used to be you would get you'd come in to vote, you would get your ballot, you'd mark up your ballot and put it in the ballot box. 3 steps. Now we have 14 steps. I wish I brought my chart, but I have it on my wall. There's actually 14 steps. So we have to send you a postcard to ask you if you want a ballot. We get that back. We have to then mail you out a ballot and then mark when that was sent out. Then when it comes back, we have to make sure we mark that it has been checked in. Then it gets put in alphabetical order daily. So if you can imagine doing that for over 2,000 ballots, you know what kind of work that is. So we've done this over and over again, and it's a lot of work. We have some great election help to help us with this, but ultimately it comes down to election day. So then we sit here, we go through the ballots that come in prior to election day, the vote by mail ballots, and we have to check those in yet again, and then open them up, and then they go through the ballot box. I remember in September of 2022, it took 6 hours to get all the ballots through.
Wow. Well, the second question is actually related to what you were saying, and it is, do you feel that vote by mail is here to stay? And what is the impact of that on your department budget?
Yes, I feel it's here to stay. And we just ordered our new tabulator, so now instead of 2 ballot boxes, we have 3, because we know that in 2024, we're going to have 3, 4, maybe 5 major elections. So at least 4. And the turnout in Eastham is great. People here vote, and that's what we want people to do. We want them to vote. I wish more of them would vote in person, personally, but I think vote by mail is a convenience that people like, and it's here to stay.
And does it impact your budget?
Oh, of course it does. We had to spend $7,000 on that new tabulator. And we also have to pay the help, the people that we hire, the registrars. We have to pay, when we have, of course, anyone who's working an election, we have to pay them too. We have to pay extra for the little cards that you put in the ballot box machine. Those, to program those, it's an extra $2,000 for every election. So yeah, it's definitely more expensive.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now, the library. Everyone loves the library, apparently. No one has any lobbing any grenades at you or anything.
Most important building in town.
I know. Well, maybe you could each just share with us a little bit about, many things have happened with the library in the last several years, and we all know that. But maybe share a little vision of the next upcoming years. What's your vision for it? How are you going to serve different constituencies? Kind of just a sense of how you feel you can shape the next stage.
Well, I'll start. I like to start. I think there are a couple of things that I think are important going forward. One that isn't probably the least important is the parking situation. We have 52 spots there, and we just don't have enough space. And when we have programs, which we have all the time, they're on the street, and you can't get out, and you can't see, and I really think that the town needs to look into, perhaps looking into some land on the east side of the building, perhaps, for additional parking. I'd also like to see the library, right now we're open 5 days a week. We're not open on Sundays and on Mondays. And I'd like to see the library open at least one more day a week, preferably every day, but we're working on one more day a week. That requires, obviously, staff, and that requires money. And so right now, the trustees, with their own money, have agreed to pay for some additional staff workers so that we can open on Mondays. And that's what we're working on right now. The other thing that I think needs to be worked on is actually it came out as part of the Council on Aging study. We have a large percentage of people in town here that are over 50 and over 60, over 80. And many of them don't drive. Many of them don't drive in the wintertime, starting at the dark at 4 o'clock. And I think that we need to work on some way of providing those folks with the ability to attend programs at the library when they can't come out because they don't drive or they don't feel comfortable driving in the dark. A lot of people in town live by themselves, and I think isolation and socialization are things that we need to take care of going forward.
Thank you. Next.
First, I'd like to take a look back in terms of what the Board of Library Trustees has done, is doing, will do in the future. Well, we've been going through a transition to a new building. That, of course, was just monumental. Moving out of the old building, being in the trailers, then moving back into the new building and getting everything to operate. That involved an enormous amount of time initially. In the past year, we just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of our new director. We had a director that we had for a number of years, and we needed to hire a new director because Deb was retiring, and the Library Board of Trustees was heavily involved in the interviewing process, and since then having our new director with us. Looking forward, libraries evolve. You stop and think for a moment. There are very few institutions, businesses, governments that have existed since the time of the Egyptians and the Romans, but libraries have. And why have libraries existed through all of these ages? It's because they've evolved. So what would I look at going into the future? That's up in the air. Libraries rise to the occasion. When a need presents itself, libraries have to find a way to address those needs. And they've been doing that. When digital technology came around, everyone said, oh, libraries are going to die. No one needs books anymore. Well, that has not happened at all. Libraries are an increasing demand across the country. So we look at the issues as they present themselves, and one of our jobs is not to run the library, but to enable the library director and the staff to run the library in such a way that it meets the needs of the community.
Great, thank you very much. And once again, thank you to everyone here tonight. Thank you to the candidates. Thank you to everyone in the audience. Thank you to everyone who's here remote. And thank you to the organizers, the Eastham Chamber, and the Eastham Dog Owners Association. And I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you, and good night.
Thanks, all of you.